Liturgy of the Word, there are two tables. There are said to be two tables of the Word at Mass. The liturgy of the table of the Word and the table of the Eucharist. Both are Jesus coming to us and feeding us. The Word comes to us first and instills in us a hunger for the Eucharist. If you recall last weekend's Gospel on the road to Emmaus, Jesus kind of gives us a layout of how the Mass unfolds. There's this welcoming, this encounter. There's this sense that, Jesus says, you guys don't quite have it figured out. It's us admitting we need work. And then there's Jesus reading for them the readings, and then explaining them in the light of himself. That's the homily. And then after that, the travelers, they want Jesus to be with him more. They have a hunger for him. And then they invite him to his house and they break bread. They have Eucharist. So that is what the readings are supposed to do for us. They're supposed to instill in us a hunger for more, a hunger for Jesus to be with us, to stay with us. In the Eucharist, we receive him into ourselves to be with us and stay with us. The readings are laid out as follows. There's a 3-year cycle of readings on Sundays. And in those 3 years, each year is assigned to a different gospel writer out of the 3 that are similar, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They're called the synoptics, synoptics. They look alike. Easter's different, and so is Lent. We don't do the cycle of readings. Each season has its own set of readings. Christmas does, Advent does, Lent, and Easter. So we haven't been in ordinary time for a while. But ordinary time begins in January. You start with that gospel author, the beginning of their gospel, and by Christ the King Sunday, right before Advent, you finish that gospel. And so those 3 years, you'll cover the different authors of the gospel. Again, outside of the special seasons. John is scattered throughout each year. John is kind of a different gospel, and it's done throughout the year. The Old Testament reading is always chosen because it relates to the gospel. So you should always see a connection between the Old Testament reading and the gospel reading. That's how it was designed. The New Testament reading, however, may have no relationship whatsoever other than that it's Scripture, and we're talking about Jesus, but there's no deliberate connection between the New Testament reading and the Gospel. It is simply marching through the letters of Paul and Peter and John. It's the apostles' letters. We just march through them. And you'll just see that. You'll see one weekend we're doing the letter to the Galatians, chapter 1, verses 1 through 10. The next weekend, chapter 1, verses 11 through 15. The next weekend, chapter 2. The next weekend, chapter 3. And we get through a letter, then we start a different letter. So that's how those are lined up.